there's been some news that we can't ignore, which is the fact that there's a Chungwon-dae, a Blue House petition going on right now concerning a ban on people collecting fisheries from the like shells and abalone from the Jeju seashore at night, and that because and they're going up and they're complaining about it. This ban that's $1 million won fine if you get caught collecting the seafood. Now, why is that good? Why are you in support of this ban?
I'll start. Well, first of all, because it affects the haenyeos living on the island. I mean, this is how they make their money. This is how they support themselves and their family. And if people are secretly going out to collect on their shores, then yeah, I think that's a problem.
I mean, that is their garden. I mean, that's where they feed their families. That's where they educate their kids by the things that they harvest and send their kids to school. I mean, the culture of the haenyeo is pretty much, they all have their own territories.
Yes, they do.
And you don't cross them even if you're a haenyeo.
Exactly.
So for tourists or locals to go in there and take it away when it's so limited, that is no.
It's actually people coming from the mainland who are selling it online, right? The fishers that they catch. Some of them. This is based on the Yonhap article that I got the protest of, because the people are protesting.
Because I knew it wouldn't be Jeju locals, because no one from Jeju would do that. So that makes sense.
Because it's fascinating, because they're coming up against not just this law, but against, it's a cultural thing, right?
Yes.
Like a lot of people don't know, and Brenda, you've done a lot of research, you've written a book about it. I've worked on a couple of the government projects about haenyeo, and what people don't realize is that the Jeju haenyeo fisheries system is part of the culture of here. There's 102.
Very organized.
Very organized and very, very strict.
Sorry, I cut you off, but 102 what?
There's 102 village fishing grounds on Jeju.
Good grief.
Right.
Okay.
And this is important because each of those fishing grounds, they have their own responsibilities, right?
Right, of course.
So a part of those responsibilities are seeding their fishing grounds.
Making sure that the product is so, wow.
And the haenyeo do not go out when things are spawning.
No.
And one of their main important sayings is about not being greedy.
Yeah.
And you only take what you need when you need it. So I say triple the fine.
I like it, Brenda. I like it. Well, let me ask you a question. So there's this fine. How are they going to be catching? Are they putting in the hands of the haenyeo to report people, or are people, investigators coming along the shore? I mean,
I'm assuming it's like a bylaw thing, right? Like it's not a criminal offense, so they would have to have officers walk on the streets or whatever.
And just
but
catch
it is a threat, right?
Okay.
It's a threat enough that about 3,000 people have signed this petition against the bill. And the way that the petition goes, it has a line that says there's a certain group tries to control the public oceans as if they own them. Which is, I mean, isn't there a debate? Because it is a public area, is it not?
That's interesting.
True, but within Jeju there is, as you said, a culture,
right.
And there is tradition, and there is a definition and boundaries that have to be respected.
And it's night fishing. It's
night
harvesting.
And I think that's what is the shady part of that. Obviously, there's something a little bit underhanded going on. That's probably my English. Sometimes I really worry about myself, but. If they weren't worried about what they were doing, they would go in the daylight and just be free about it, you know?
Oh, I didn't actually think it was that...
Secret?
Yeah, not...
Well, who goes out at night like that?
I mean, it seems shady to me.
But
the thing that bothers me about that is because haenyeo have very strict times that they can harvest that,
when
right?
the tides go up.
Right, but there's also, based on the government reports about the sustainability of these fisheries, they say that they have to stop at a very specific time, and if the haenyeo do not stop at that time, if they're still in the water at that time, there are severe punishments for the entire community.
Yeah, so why would anyone else be free of those rules when they're Wow, this is really important news. So now I have another question for you. So... if they are selling these products online, is that enough? Did they talk about that in the article about that's another way to catch them? Because if they're selling it online, you could be.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't mention that.
I'm sure it's all in the works.
This was like a Yonhap Wire article, so it's very quick and it's very brief, right?
Yeah. Okay.
But this is some stuff that we should be looking into because
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
I mean, you probably have these facts and figures too. I'm a big facts and figures guy.
So, Brenda, on our podcast,
When it's in front of my eyes, I have it. But I'm not like you. I'm older than you. So no.
I'm not.
I need Post-its.
But he always just pulls out the craziest facts. So let's
Yes,
see what he's
I
got.
know.
What do you got for us?
Okay. So,
Okay.
so as of 2019, the 3,820 haenyeo represented 41.9% of the island's fisheries population.
Wow.
So that's how much it was in 2019. So imagine how much it was responsible before, like in the 1960s when there was thousands of them, right?
Nice.
And now
we're both looking at the facts like
you're cheating. You're trying to steal my facts. So in 1990, the haenyeo's fisheries production reached 17 billion won, representing 21.5%.
What year? One more time.
1990.
Okay.
The haenyeo fisheries production reached 17 billion won, representing 21.5% of the produced of what fishing vessels produce.
Okay.
So fishing vessels produce tons more, right? Yeah. But
still impressive.
In 2019, they actually gave more money. They earned 19.9 billion won, but it only represents 4.6% of compared to what the fishing vessels actually get in. And this has been a big problem for haenyeo in general, right? Like there was rules instituted years ago about preventing boats from fishing on Jeju because of the haenyeo, because of the overfishing. Now, we're coming up to the problem now, as you know, as everyone knows, that the haenyeo are depleting.
Yes.
Now, I'm curious to know, Brenda, what do you think that the government or what should be done for haenyeo? This is a controversial issue, I actually think.
I do too, because it's been long discussed.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they are, a dying generation. I think people say, are there going to be more? And I usually say, not really. That there are some people trying to become haenyeo, but they're more the exception than the rule. But I think most of them, there has to be some kind of ongoing pension for their economic survival until they pass away.
Right.
I think that's the bottom line. Then the other thing for them, I think, is some of the legacy, which people have done, the museums, the schools, all that. But I always say, I don't ever talk about haenyeo at this point without talking about the environment. That Jeju Ocean is part of the Pacific Ocean. Pacific Ocean is part of planet Earth, and it's the dirtiest, most polluted ocean of all the oceans. And the great garbage patches between California and Hawaii. And now the threat of Fukushima wastewater coming that's going to ruin the fisheries and pollute waters in Japan and Korea. That to me is just really a problem. But I think the main thing the government is trying to do, which they have been doing, is give them some kinds of economic support.
Supplemental income.
And I think the bottom line for them is really economic. And then maybe something like extra money so that they can continue to support their kids going to school.
Exactly.
The reason they're diving and risking their lives is for their families'
education.
But the other thing I wanted to just add is that when people think about the haenyeo, because as you know, there's so much international attention about them.
Yeah.
Wow, these women, they're so rare. They're
really, and especially in the last few years.
Yeah, and they just don't realize that for them, it's a job.
Thank you.
It's economic survival.
Yes.
So that's the bottom line.
I try to explain this to people because people treat them like they're exotic animals, right? And it drives. They take pictures.
Tourism.
They take pictures of them. They act like, oh, let's go on a haenyeo experience, and like they're dolphins. Let's go swim with the haenyeo, and it drives me crazy because imagine replacing haenyeo with plumber. Or imagine with another trade. There is more to a haenyeo than necessarily that, because there is a cultural aspect to it. But I remember when I first interviewed a haenyeo back in 2010, I was at her minbak and I spoke to her and I said, what do you think the government should do for haenyeo? And she said, nothing. Let the profession die off, because no one wants to be haenyeo, because obviously, I'm generalizing. No one wants to be haenyeo because it's more than just a job. But it's very, very difficult when they do surveys. Back in 1990, I think 64% of haenyeo said they didn't want to do it. And when I spoke to husbands, when I interviewed them a couple of years ago, I asked them, "What do you want to do? Do you want the haenyeo profession to go away?" They said, "No." I said, "Do you want your daughters to be haenyeo?" They said, "No." "Do you want your wives to be haenyeo?" They said no, because it's not it's a dangerous job.
It's hard on the body. It's hard on, it's interesting. I do, I was down in underneath Sunrise Peak maybe about, 7 months ago or something like that, and some haenyeo were coming in, and it was just this perfect opportunity to take a picture. But I went and asked permission. I said, would you mind? There's this background, and it turned out to be a really beautiful photo that they were really happy with. But I would not take photos without asking. Do you know? Like, it's
weird.
It's
weird.
But that's a whole, we could go on
I mean,
about that for a
you
while.
have the right to. It's in a public space, right? Like, you don't have to ask. It's polite to.
It's about respect.
It's about respect. I'm not saying run up there and take pictures, but like it's they're working. I wouldn't want someone to come up to me while I'm working on newspapers, and taking pictures of me randomly.
Right.
It's not. I have a job to do, and they have a job to do, and they're not here because of tourism. Though the government is trying to promote it for tourism,
for sure.
But maybe that's also part of trying to preserve it.
What do you think, Brenda?
Well, I think it's money's behind promoting Jeju tourism, and the haenyeo is a very attractive bait.
Yeah.
But I don't think it always comes back to serve the interests of the haenyeo.
Absolutely.
So I think the long-term thing for the haenyeo is protecting Jeju environment and joining the global movement for the environment and oceans being, safe, and because that's really what it comes down to. I mean, even if they don't dive anymore, they're going to still be living and have kids and families. So then we're all in the same place.
So it's interesting you're talking about moving it from being like a backdrop, a reason to come here and look at stuff, to actually having a significant purpose to preserving sustainable fishing and the environment.
Yeah, I don't like seeing the haenyeo segmented out of the issues going on in Jeju Island. Sasam. They were affected, but not only the haenyeo.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The diving is not just the haenyeo. I mean, after they dive, they go to the farms directly and start farming.
People don't realize that half the job of being a haenyeo is farming.
Exactly. So
because they can only go into the sea so many days a year.
It's a hard life. I will say that. It's a hard life. Yeah.